The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood at the window of her private study. Her fingers traced the condensation on the glass while she watched the groundskeepers tend to the manicured gardens below. The scene was peaceful, almost ordinary, yet Catherine knew that within hours, nothing about their lives would ever be ordinary again. William emerged from the adjoining room, his usually pressed shirt slightly wrinkled from a sleepless night. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally confident stride seemed hesitant. He carried 2 cups of tea, a simple gesture that had become their morning ritual over the past 23 years of marriage. The steam rose between them as they sat in comfortable silence, both knowing that words could not adequately capture the magnitude of what lay ahead. The decision had not come suddenly. For months, whispered conversations had taken place in the privacy of their Norfolk home, Anmer Hall. Catherine would find William staring out at the vast countryside, his mind clearly elsewhere. During family dinners, their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, would notice their parents exchanging meaningful glances across the table. The weight of royal duty had always been present in their lives, but something had shifted. It began with small moments of doubt. William found himself questioning whether the endless cycle of ribbon cuttings, state dinners, and public appearances was the life he truly wanted for his family. Catherine, who had gracefully adapted to royal life after their fairy tale wedding in 2011, began to feel the suffocating nature of constant public scrutiny. Every outfit choice was analyzed, every facial expression interpreted, every parenting decision criticized by media outlets and social media commentators. The breaking point came during a particularly challenging week in November. Paparazzi had followed their children to school, despite explicit agreements about privacy. Charlotte, now 20 years old and studying at university, called her mother in tears after tabloid photographers had camped outside her dormitory. George, who had always handled royal expectations with remarkable grace, confided to his father that he felt like he was living in a fishbowl. That evening, William and Catherine made a decision that would send shockwaves through the British monarchy and beyond. They would step back from their royal duties, not in scandal or controversy, but quietly, with dignity, to reclaim their lives as a family. The conversations with King Charles were among the most difficult either William or Catherine had ever experienced. The king, now in his late 70s, listened with the wisdom that comes from decades of royal service. He understood his son's desire for privacy and a normal life, having once harbored similar feelings himself. However, the constitutional implications were staggering. William was second in line to the throne, and his decision would fundamentally alter the succession. Charles sat in his study at Clarence House, surrounded by portraits of previous monarchs, as William and Catherine explained their reasoning. Catherine spoke with quiet conviction about wanting their children to have choices, to pursue careers and relationships without the burden of royal protocol. William emphasized that this was not a rejection of service to the country, but rather a different kind of service that honored both duty and personal fulfillment. The king's response surprised them both. Rather than anger or disappointment, Charles expressed a deep understanding. He shared stories of his own youth, when he had questioned whether royal life was compatible with personal happiness. He spoke of the sacrifices he had made and the relationships that had suffered under the weight of royal expectations. Most importantly, he gave them his blessing. The legal and constitutional machinery began moving immediately. Palace lawyers worked around the clock to draft documents that had never been needed before. Parliament would need to be consulted, as would the governments of the Commonwealth realms, where William and Catherine served as representatives of the Crown. The Church of England, where William held the future role of Supreme Governor, required careful consideration. Meanwhile, the couple began the emotional process of saying goodbye to the roles that had defined their adult lives. Catherine walked through the offices of her patronages, meeting with staff members who had become like family. Her work with mental health awareness, early childhood development, and the arts had been more than ceremonial duties. They had been genuine passions that had created lasting change. William spent hours with his private secretary, reviewing decades of correspondence with military units, conservation organizations, and community groups. Each letter represented a connection, a commitment, a promise that he was now having to break. The weight of disappointing people who had counted on him was almost unbearable. The children's reactions varied significantly. George, at 25, felt a mixture of relief and guilt. He had always known that his path was predetermined, leading inevitably to the throne. The prospect of freedom to choose his own career was intoxicating, yet he struggled with the feeling that he was abandoning his birthright and duty to the country. Charlotte embraced the decision wholeheartedly. She had chafed under royal restrictions from an early age, yearning for the anonymity that would allow her to pursue her passion for environmental science without every research project becoming a media spectacle. The thought of being able to travel, work, and live without constant security presence filled her with excitement. Louis, the youngest at 18, experienced the most confusion. Royal life was all he had ever known, and the structure it provided had been comforting rather than constraining. The idea of suddenly becoming a private citizen was both thrilling and terrifying. He worried about losing the platform that royal status provided for causes he cared about, particularly his work with disadvantaged youth. As word of their decision began to leak within palace circles, the reactions were mixed. Some senior courtiers expressed horror at what they saw as an abandonment of duty. Others, particularly younger staff members, quietly admired the courage it took to prioritize family and personal authenticity over tradition and expectation. The Archbishop of Canterbury, upon being informed of the decision, requested a private meeting with William and Catherine. In the historic surroundings of Lambeth Palace, they discussed the spiritual and moral implications of their choice. The Archbishop surprisingly offered words of support, noting that even religious leaders sometimes needed to step back from formal roles to serve in different ways. Security arrangements required immediate attention. The couple had lived their entire married life surrounded by protection officers, and the transition to private citizenship would require careful planning. Threat assessments were updated, new protocols established, and contingency plans developed for various scenarios. International reactions began filtering in through diplomatic channels. Commonwealth governments expressed surprise, but generally supportive understanding. The Prime Minister, briefed by palace officials, assured William and Catherine of the government's respect for their decision while beginning preparations for the constitutional changes that would be required. As the weeks passed, the reality of their choice became increasingly tangible. Staff members were reassigned or offered alternative positions within the royal household. Offices were cleared of personal belongings accumulated over decades of service. Official engagements scheduled months in advance were quietly canceled or transferred to other working royals. The media remained unaware of the momentous changes taking place behind palace walls. William and Catherine continued their public duties with characteristic professionalism, giving no hint of the upheaval in their private lives. Their final public engagements took on added poignancy, though only they knew these were indeed final appearances as working royals. Catherine's last official engagement was a visit to a children's hospital where she had served as patron for over a decade. As she read stories to young patients and comforted worried parents, she reflected on the meaningful connections that royal status had enabled. The children's faces lit up at her presence, and Catherine realized that while she was giving up her formal role, the impact of her years of service would continue long after her departure. William's final engagement was a military ceremony honoring veterans of recent conflicts. Standing in his ceremonial uniform, surrounded by men and women who had served their country with distinction, he felt the full weight of his decision. These individuals had sacrificed for their nation, and William questioned whether his choice to step back was selfish or necessary. The evening before their announcement was to be made public, William and Catherine sat in their Kensington Palace apartment, surrounded by packed boxes and childhood mementos. The rooms that had been their home for over a decade seemed strange and unfamiliar, already feeling like someone else's space. They spoke quietly about their hopes and fears for the future, acknowledging that they were embarking on a journey without precedent or guidebook. The palace press office had never faced a challenge quite like this one. Communications teams worked through the night crafting statements that would explain the unprecedented decision without creating constitutional crisis or public relations disaster. Every word was scrutinized, every phrase analyzed for potential misinterpretation. The announcement needed to be clear, respectful, and final. At precisely 9 o'clock on a gray Tuesday morning, the official statement was released simultaneously to all major news outlets worldwide. The words were simple yet profound. Their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales, have made the personal decision to step back from their roles as working members of the royal family. This decision has been made with careful consideration and the full support of His Majesty the King. Within minutes, news alerts chimed on millions of phones across the globe. Television broadcasts were interrupted with breaking news banners. Social media platforms erupted with reactions ranging from shock to support, confusion to celebration. The carefully constructed statement raised more questions than it answered, but William and Catherine had been deliberate in their brevity. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Reporters rushed to Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and Kensington Palace, hoping to catch sight of the royal couple or glean additional information from palace staff. Security was quietly increased at all royal residences as crowds of curious onlookers gathered outside the gates. Inside the palace walls, the mood was subdued. Staff members who had worked closely with William and Catherine for years struggled to process the news, even though many had suspected something significant was developing. The prince and princess moved through their final day as working royals with quiet dignity, personally thanking everyone who had supported them throughout their journey. Catherine spent the morning visiting each department within their office, from the correspondence team who handled thousands of letters from well-wishers each year to the events coordinators who had orchestrated countless successful public engagements. Her conversations were personal and heartfelt, acknowledging the dedication of individuals who had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make their royal duties successful. William met privately with military leaders and representatives from his various patronages. These conversations were among the most difficult, as many of the organizations he was leaving behind held deep personal significance. His work with veterans, air ambulance services, and conservation groups had been more than ceremonial duties. They had been genuine passions that had shaped his identity as a royal. The children handled the media attention with remarkable maturity. George, who had been preparing for increased royal responsibilities, found himself fielding questions from friends and professors about the family's decision. He chose to respond with honesty, explaining that while he respected the institution of monarchy, he believed his parents had the right to choose their own path. Charlotte, still at university, discovered that her student accommodation was surrounded by photographers hoping for a comment or photograph. She worked with university security to maintain her privacy while continuing her studies. Her friends rallied around her, creating a protective barrier that allowed her to maintain some semblance of normal student life during the media frenzy. Louis, the most private of the three children, found the sudden attention overwhelming. He had always been able to blend into the background during public events, but now his every movement was scrutinized for clues about the family's future plans. His school implemented additional security measures to protect his privacy during this transitional period. King Charles addressed the nation that evening in a televised broadcast from Buckingham Palace. His words were carefully chosen to express both understanding for his son's decision and confidence in the monarchy's continued strength. He spoke of the importance of family, the value of personal choice, and the evolution of royal duty in the modern era. The king's speech struck a delicate balance between acknowledging the unprecedented nature of William and Catherine's decision while maintaining institutional stability. He announced that other working members of the royal family would take on additional responsibilities to ensure continuity of service. Princess Anne, already the hardest-working royal, quietly accepted an expanded role, as did the Earl and Countess of Wessex. International reactions poured in from around the world. Commonwealth leaders issued statements of support for the royal family while emphasizing their continued commitment to the crown. The Archbishop of Canterbury released a statement calling William and Catherine's decision brave and thoughtful, noting that true service sometimes requires difficult personal choices. Public opinion polls revealed a surprisingly divided nation. Younger respondents were generally supportive, viewing the decision as a natural response to media intrusion and the pressures of modern royal life. Older generations were more critical, expressing disappointment in what they perceived as an abandonment of duty and tradition. Social media became a battleground of opinions. Hashtags supporting and criticizing the decision trended worldwide. Celebrity supporters praised William and Catherine for prioritizing their mental health and family well-being. Critics argued that royal privilege came with lifelong obligations that could not simply be abandoned when convenient. The constitutional implications began to unfold as legal experts analyzed the precedent being set. Parliament was briefed on the situation, with senior ministers expressing support for the royal family while acknowledging the complexity of the constitutional questions raised. The line of succession remained unchanged, but the practical implications of a reluctant future king created unprecedented challenges. William and Catherine's final week as working royals was filled with private meetings and quiet farewells. They hosted intimate gatherings for close friends and loyal staff members, sharing memories and expressing gratitude for years of dedicated service. These events were deliberately kept private, away from media attention that had intensified following their announcement. Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, became a source of strength during this transition, having watched her daughter navigate royal life with grace and dignity. Carol understood the toll that constant public scrutiny had taken on the family. She provided practical support and emotional encouragement as her daughter prepared to step away from the role that had defined her adult life. William's relationship with his father deepened during this period. King Charles, who had experienced his own struggles with royal expectations and media attention, became a source of wisdom and understanding. Their conversations moved beyond constitutional concerns to address personal fears and hopes for the future. The prince's brother, Harry, reached out from his home in California to offer support and understanding. Having made his own difficult decision to step back from royal duties years earlier, Harry understood the complexities his brother was facing. Their conversation was the longest they had shared in years, bridging differences that had developed over time. Staff members began the practical process of transitioning responsibilities to other members of the royal household. Patronages were redistributed among working royals, with careful consideration given to maintaining the effectiveness of charitable organizations that had relied on William and Catherine's support. The princess's work with early childhood development was particularly challenging to transition. Her passion for the subject and genuine expertise had driven significant policy changes and public awareness. A special foundation was established to continue her work, with Catherine agreeing to provide guidance and support in a private capacity. William's conservation efforts required careful handling to maintain momentum on critical environmental initiatives. Several organizations requested that he continue his involvement in a private capacity, recognizing that his genuine commitment to environmental causes transcended his royal status. Financial arrangements required delicate negotiation. William and Catherine had lived their entire married life with expenses covered by the Duchy of Cornwall and various royal grants. Transitioning to financial independence required careful planning and professional advice to ensure they could maintain their family's security and privacy. The couple began exploring potential future endeavors that would allow them to contribute meaningfully to society without the constraints of royal protocol. They met with representatives from international charitable organizations, private foundations, and academic institutions interested in their expertise and experience. Housing arrangements presented unique challenges. Kensington Palace had been their primary residence, but stepping back from royal duties meant finding private accommodations that could provide the security and privacy their family required. Several properties were quietly evaluated for suitability, with security assessments conducted discreetly. The children's education required immediate attention. While George had completed his formal education, Charlotte and Louis needed to consider how their changed circumstances would affect their academic and career plans. Universities and potential employers were contacted to discuss privacy measures and security requirements. International travel, which had been a significant aspect of their royal duties, required complete restructuring. Diplomatic passports would be surrendered, and future travel would need to be planned without the support of Foreign Office protocols and embassy assistance that had facilitated their official visits. Their final public appearance as working royals was a Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. Walking down the ancient aisle, surrounded by representatives from nations across the globe, William and Catherine embodied the dignity and grace that had characterized their years of service. The service was poignant and meaningful, celebrating the connections they had fostered throughout their royal careers. As they left Westminster Abbey for the final time as working royals, photographers captured images that would become historic. William and Catherine walked hand in hand, their faces calm and resolved, their children beside them. The photographs would later be described as capturing both the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in royal history. 6 months after their historic announcement, William and Catherine had settled into their new life with a quiet contentment that had eluded them for years. Their new home, a restored Georgian manor house in the Cotswolds, provided the privacy and normalcy they had craved while remaining within reasonable distance of London and their ongoing charitable commitments. The morning routine that had once involved briefings on state visits and public engagements now centered around family breakfast and planning their independent charitable work. Catherine discovered the simple pleasure of preparing meals for her family without the assistance of palace staff, while William found peace in tending to their private garden, a hobby he had never had time to pursue during his royal duties. The transition had not been without challenges. Learning to navigate daily life without constant security presence required significant adjustment. Simple activities like grocery shopping or visiting the local pub became adventures in maintaining privacy while engaging with their community. The couple worked with security experts to establish protocols that protected their family while allowing for genuine human connections. George had embraced his newfound freedom with enthusiasm. He pursued a master's degree in sustainable development at Oxford, focusing on environmental policy without the weight of future royal expectations. His professors noted his genuine passion for the subject matter and his ability to contribute meaningfully to academic discussions without the deference typically shown to royals. Charlotte flourished in her environmental science program, finally able to pursue fieldwork and research opportunities that had previously been restricted due to security concerns. She spent a summer working with marine biologists in Scotland, studying the impact of climate change on coastal ecosystems. For the first time in her life, she was simply another dedicated student, rather than a royal figure being watched and evaluated. Louis initially struggled with the adjustment to private life. The structure and purpose that royal duties had provided were difficult to replace, and he experienced a period of uncertainty about his identity and future direction. However, with the support of his family and professional counseling, he discovered a passion for music therapy and began training to work with young people facing mental health challenges. King Charles maintained regular contact with his son and daughter-in-law, their relationship strengthened by the honesty and courage of their decision. He privately admitted to close advisors that he admired their choice and sometimes wondered what his own life might have been like with similar freedom to choose his path. The monarchy adapted to function without two of its most popular members. Princess Anne expanded her already extensive charitable portfolio, while the Earl and Countess of Wessex took on additional international responsibilities. The institution proved its resilience, with public support for the monarchy remaining stable despite the significant change. William and Catherine established the Cambridge Foundation, a private charitable organization focused on mental health, environmental conservation, and supporting young people in making positive life choices. Working without royal protocol allowed them to be more direct in addressing controversial issues and taking positions that had been impossible while representing the crown. Their first major initiative involved working with former gang members in London to develop intervention programs for at-risk youth. Catherine's background in psychology and William's military experience proved invaluable in creating approaches that addressed both immediate safety concerns and long-term rehabilitation. The work was challenging and sometimes dangerous, but deeply meaningful in ways their royal duties had never been. The couple's marriage strengthened during this transition period. Freed from the pressures of public scrutiny and royal expectations, they rediscovered aspects of their relationship that had been overshadowed by duty and protocol. They took long walks together, traveled privately to places they had always wanted to visit, and spent quiet evenings discussing their hopes and dreams without considering how their words might be interpreted by the media. Catherine pursued her long-suppressed interest in photography, enrolling in workshops and developing skills that went beyond the posed portraits and official events that had characterized her royal life. Her work began appearing in exhibitions focused on social issues, with proceeds supporting various charitable causes. The freedom to express herself artistically proved liberating and fulfilling. William reconnected with his passion for flying, obtaining certification to pilot humanitarian missions in remote areas where medical supplies and personnel were desperately needed. His military training and leadership experience proved valuable in coordinating relief efforts, and he found deep satisfaction in directly helping people rather than simply highlighting their needs through royal visits. The public gradually adapted to their absence from the royal landscape. While some continued to express disappointment in their decision, many came to respect their choice and follow their independent charitable work with interest. Their popularity actually increased in some circles, as people appreciated their authenticity and willingness to prioritize family and personal values over tradition and expectation. International recognition of their work began emerging as their foundation's projects showed measurable impact. Catherine's research on early childhood trauma informed policy discussions in several countries, while William's conservation efforts attracted support from environmental organizations worldwide. They discovered that their influence and ability to create positive change had not diminished with their departure from royal duties. The couple began accepting speaking engagements at universities and conferences, sharing their experiences and insights without the constraints of royal protocol. Their presentations were candid and thoughtful, addressing both the privileges and pressures of their former roles while advocating for mental health awareness and environmental responsibility. Their children's relationship with their extended royal family remained strong, but evolved. Holiday gatherings at Sandringham and Balmoral continued, but the dynamics were different. George, Charlotte, and Louis interacted with their royal cousins as private citizens rather than potential future working royals, creating more genuine and relaxed relationships. The couple's financial independence proved both liberating and challenging. Book deals, speaking fees, and charitable foundation management provided income, but budgeting and financial planning required skills they had never needed to develop. They worked with financial advisors to ensure their family's security while maintaining their charitable commitments. Catherine's relationship with her own family deepened as she was able to spend more time with her parents and siblings without the formal protocols that had previously governed their interactions. Sunday lunches at her parents' home became treasured opportunities for normal family time, complete with heated discussions about football and friendly competition over board games. William's connection to his military colleagues strengthened as he was able to participate in veteran support programs without the complications of royal protocol. He joined hiking expeditions with wounded veterans, participated in fundraising challenges, and provided mentorship to young people considering military careers. The couple began traveling internationally for their charitable work, visiting refugee camps, environmental projects, and educational initiatives around the world. These trips were conducted privately, allowing for genuine engagement with communities and issues without the diplomatic complications of royal visits. They slept in guest houses rather than embassies, ate local food, and experienced cultures in ways that had been impossible during their royal careers. Their work with mental health initiatives expanded globally as they partnered with organizations addressing depression, anxiety, and suicide prevention. Catherine's personal experience with the pressures of public life proved valuable in developing programs for young people struggling with social media pressure and unrealistic expectations. William's environmental work evolved to include direct involvement in conservation projects. He spent weeks in African wildlife reserves, worked with marine conservation groups in the Pacific, and participated in reforestation efforts in South America. The hands-on nature of this work provided satisfaction that ribbon-cutting ceremonies and photo opportunities had never offered. The couple's legacy within the royal family began taking shape as their decision influenced discussions about modernizing the monarchy for future generations. Their courage in prioritizing personal authenticity over duty created precedents that would benefit future royals facing similar conflicts between public service and private fulfillment. As their second year of private life began, William and Catherine reflected on their journey with gratitude and peace. They had sacrificed titles, privileges, and security, but gained authenticity, freedom, and the ability to serve others in ways that aligned with their values and passions. Their quiet goodbye had indeed left an indelible mark on royal history, proving that true service sometimes requires the courage to choose an unconventional path. Their children were thriving in environments that allowed them to develop their own identities and pursue their own dreams. George's academic work was gaining recognition in environmental policy circles. Charlotte's research was contributing to important conservation efforts, and Louis had discovered his calling in helping young people overcome mental health challenges. The foundation they had built continued growing, attracting support from individuals and organizations inspired by their authentic commitment to making a positive difference. Their work was creating measurable impact in communities around the world, proving that influence and effectiveness could exist outside traditional power structures. William and Catherine had discovered that stepping away from their royal roles had not diminished their ability to serve others or create positive change. Instead, it had enhanced their effectiveness by allowing them to work without political constraints and protocol limitations. Their quiet departure from royal life had become a powerful statement about the importance of personal authenticity and the many ways individuals can contribute to society. Their story would be remembered not as an abandonment of duty, but as a redefinition of service that honored both personal integrity and public good. They had shown that true leadership sometimes requires the courage to walk away from expected paths and create new ways of making a positive difference in the world.